How's it going all? Had a couple of people ask me recently how the worms are going, how the compost is going, and on another clip, how are we making up the compost teas now to feed the plants and all the various beds around the place. So I thought I'd do a bit of an update on all three. We'll pop in and have a look at the Bathtub Worm Farm in a little while, or towards the end of the clip. But I thought, just to begin with, I'll show you the compost pile behind us here, and just how I make up a very basic compost tea. Over the past few years, I've posted a few clips on the different compost teas and casting teas we've made up to feed the patch. This time around I'm not doing the activated compost teas that we've tried in the past, mainly because while I understand the science behind it, feeding up bacteria which basically make the nutrients in the compost and the soil available to the plants, I have no way to tell when they're at their peak levels in the compost tea. So I figure I might as well just dilute the compost down that's full of the bacteria and the nutrients, and that way I can spread it further around the patch rather than just taking a handful and trying to top dress every bed. I don't make enough to be able to do that. Anyway, enough rabbiting on. We'll go over and have a look at the compost pile, and then we'll get into the compost tea, and hopefully at the end I'll remember to show you the worms in the bathtub. So this is our little composting area. We've got a little compost heater going over there, bit of an experiment. Beautiful red amaranth there. And this is the compost cage I've been pulling the compost from over the last couple of weeks. Just over the back of this cage here, we've got some self-sown plants. We've got some broccoli and also some celery. These guys germinated after I took a little bit of compost off the top, so obviously they hadn't decomposed in the compost and they've decided to sprout. I'm going to leave them in there, see if we can have a small broccoli harvest. Down the base here though is where I've been collecting the bulk of the compost. So we've taken out about 60 centimetres or 2 foot worth of compost from here. It's absolutely fantastic stuff. We've found a load of the eggs in here, or the cocoons, the worm cocoons, and also, oh there we go, there's a cocoon there, bringing up a little bit closer, cocoon there, and a nice big compost worm there. So 2 cocoons. It's absolutely fantastic stuff. The bulk of this has been used in root pouches as I've been filling them up, just amending the soil in there. Also too, a couple of the beds out the front, and over the past week or so I've been using a lot of it in the compost teas that I'm going to be making up and showing you. With this stuff though, I don't like putting it straight into the water to make up the tea, because there are the worms and the cocoons in there. There's another worm there. I don't really want to put these guys through the compost tea at all. I'd rather collect them all before they go into the tea, and I can pop them in different garden beds or maybe even the aquaponics around the yard. So this is where I'm sieving out the worms and the cocoons, just so they don't end up in the compost tea in a watery grave. I've just set up my ironing board. This thing here came with the house, cost us nothing. It's the best workbench I've had in the patch. It folds up nice and neatly and stores away. It raises up to my level. I'm a little bit taller than most. Take it anywhere in the patch. Absolutely fantastic. Bucket down the base for the sifted compost. Here I have my fancy dancy compost screens, but I mean you don't need to use these. There's a whole heap of different screening methods you could use. I mean an ice cream container with holes in the base, that makes a perfect little screen for small amounts. Here I've got 2 different ones. This one's about an 8mm, so what's that? Roughly around about 1/3 of an inch, and these guys here are about 5 to 6mm or 1/4 of an inch. I like using these guys because I get a lot of the big stuff out of here. Some of the worms make it through, and then they get trapped in this second layer where I can pull them out, as well as the cocoons. Most of the cocoons won't fall through there, so for me it works. I mean for other people, you know, you just got to work with what you got, I suppose. And also too, a little container just to sieve them into. This is just a drawer from one of the kids' old storage systems, and I have a ice cream container with a couple of handfuls of compost in it, and there's some worms in there and some cocoons that I pulled out yesterday. Because I've been doing it over a couple of days, I've moistened down the compost just so the worms and the cocoons don't dry out. So I'll go grab some compost and we'll have a bit of a sieve and see what we can find. Just here I found there's a whole heap of worms just on the surface here, some tinier ones. Saw another one down here, so a fair few worms in there. Pretty happy about that. Also too, just on the top I've already seen some cocoons here. There's one there and another one just there. So I just try and pick these guys out as I see them and come across them. If I can pick out the worms, especially these tiny little fellas, if I can pick them out before I shake the compost around too much, I'm pretty happy. Don't want to damage them. Like to look after my worms. More cocoons. There's some down the base here. Come on fella. So we'll give this a bit of a shake anyway. We'll see what comes through. So there we go, there's a couple more worms. So a lot of this big chunky stuff might have some small worms in it, so I don't want to break it up too much. So there we go, that's pretty much all it. I'll just pop this stuff, another worm, I'll just pop this back in the compost pile just to one side so I don't have to rescreen it again. Now what we have here, a lot of the finer bits of compost and a lot of the small worms come through here as well. So I like to have a bit of a dig through. There's one worm. So I'll give this a bit of a shake. So there we go. And what we get down the bottom here is very nice, fine compost that goes really well into the compost tea. I like it because a lot of the larger chunks are taken out and it means it doesn't clog up the nozzle of the watering can. Not that I use the rose, but yeah, I do use the nozzle. It's a bit hard for you guys to make out, but none of the cocoons actually make it through this finer mesh. So I'll just go through this compost quickly and pull out a couple of cocoons just to give you some idea on how many I'm finding in here. Another tiny worm. So there you go, there's about 5 minutes worth of picking, and that just goes to show you how well these worms are going in this compost. They're reproducing really well. Some of these cocoons are empty, by the way, so there's loads of little babies in here. I've just actually seen another cocoon with a little baby worm next to it. So there are absolutely loads in here. Really, really happy with this compost. Anyway, stop juggling these guys and put them to rest. Just put them down in there. Have another quick little look through here. No, can't see any more cocoons. So that there just goes straight in with this compost here. It'll fit through the watering can. So from there, I just take that and add it into my compost bucket down the bottom. And I'll take you down now and I'll show you how I mix up the compost tea. So what we've got here is just basically a 100 litre or about a 25 gallon barrel. And into this I'm putting roughly 10 litres of the screen compost, and then I'll be filling it up just with water straight from the tap. A lot of people worry about the chlorine in the water killing off the bacteria and the beneficial microbes. I don't really have to worry about that here because we have a 3-stage carbon filter on our water for the yard. We decided to take the plunge and install a filter when we got the aquaponics system because chlorine doesn't really mix with aquaculture. If you are worried about chlorine in the water killing off beneficial microorganisms in your compost tea or in indeed your garden, definitely have a look around online. There is a lot of conflicting information out there. I would suggest you go and have a look at Stephen's video on his Alberta Urban Garden channel here on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description down below. He's gone and actually done tests in a lab to see the different levels of chlorine and how it's affected the bacteria in his garden. For me though, I'm not too concerned at all. Our water comes out smelling clean, while the water from the neighbours' taps comes out smelling like a swimming pool. So I definitely know our filters are working for us. So that's about it, I think, around about 90 to 100 litres in there. So just turn that off. Now I've got my trusty Chinese elm stick just to give it a bit of a stir. Now what I'm trying to do is just get as many solids suspended into the water as I can. So after I've bumped over the tripod and answered the telephone, what I can do is take a couple of these buckets and collect some of this compost tea with a lot of the solids suspended in the water, and I can carry these down to the patch where I can then empty it into the watering can and put it on the plants. Once the water level gets low, all you need to do is just fill her up and start over again, because there's a lot of solids down the base of the bucket. So there we go, that's pretty much all it. It's not as dark and as rich as the first batch, but it's still got nutrients and bacteria in there, and I don't think the plants are going to complain at all. Give it a bit of a stir, fill up the buckets, and off we go to the patch again. I do find that the solids tend to settle a little bit in the buckets as they're waiting to go onto the bed, so I give them a bit of a stir with a stake as well. Pour it into a watering can, as I find that gets the compost tea where I want it a lot better than just a bucket. So here's a bit of a look at the Bathtub Worm Farm. As you can see, there's just a lot of solid scraps in here at the moment. Tops of bananas, avocados, a bit of broccoli that didn't make it into dinner. Loads of worms in here still. A lot of babies as well. I don't know, sorry fellas for subjecting you to the light, but there's a lot of small baby worms in there. So this farm's doing alright. This farm was our primary worm farm to begin with. This was the farm that we pretty much were collecting all our casting from and whatnot. But seeing as the compost pile has done so well, this is pretty much just a bit of a backup for us at the moment. We might get back into it and, you know, beef up production at a later date, but at the moment I've got enough on my plate. I've always been interested in breeding the compost worms as a fish feed, but yeah, we'll just wait and see about that. Just down in here too, I'll just show you, the top of this manure does look a bit dry, but underneath, let's pull a little bit out, it is moist, and there are, if I bring them into shot, there are a load of worms in there. So this is a cow manure one. You may have seen the last clip. I haven't changed the bedding since then. So I've just been slowly breeding up the numbers because I did have a bit of a loss there a while back. So anyway, there's a bit of a look at the system. They're definitely liking the tomatoes. They're just the bases of some of the summertime gold. We had a couple that were blown, and just the cracked top of the Werikawai tomatoes, I've been calling Werikanaois. A couple of rotten bananas have made it in here as well, and they're always a bit of a favourite of the worms, but it looks like they're tucking into the tomatoes at the moment. Oh yeah, they're loving the tomatoes. So there you go. There's a bit of a look at the worm farm. So there you go folks, there's a bit of a look at how I'm using the compost to make up a very basic compost tea, just to share the love around the patch. There's no way I could top dress all the beds with this compost in here. There's just too many. So I think that, you know, making up a basic compost tea like that is a great way to get the nutrients and also some of the microorganisms out there to the different beds around the place. I have seen how well this compost has worked out the front. I posted a front yard update clip a while back showing you how I planted out the broccoli out there and some of the cauliflower. That stuff has just flown along. It's been our best brassicas anywhere in the patch this season or ever, I think. Nice tight heads of broccoli as well as cauliflower. So the only thing I can put it down to is how good this compost is. Those beds were fed up with about 3 to 4 inches or 7.5 to 10 centimeters of that compost, and yeah, those plants have just been thriving ever since. So I'm pretty stoked with the way it's gone. The majority of this stuff here will be used to top dress 2 or 3 other beds around the place, and also fill up some root pouches I want to plan out as well for the coming warm weather crops. We're coming into spring hopefully soon here in southeast Queensland, so a lot of that compost will be used for that, and the rest of it will just be made up into compost tea as you saw today. The compost worms, I haven't been posting a lot of clips on those guys, mainly because these compost cages have seriously taken over the role of worm breeding and castings manufacturing in the garden here. So the Bathtub Worm Farm, when I change bedding out or do a bit of a harvest, I will post a clip. I will pretty much leave it there though. Don't forget to subscribe if you're a new viewer. There's a couple of thumbnails up and down there that you can suss out just different aspects of how we work the patch here, and also the aquaponics and the like. So I hope you've enjoyed the clip folks, and if you do have any comments, questions or suggestions, feel free to leave them in the comments section below and I'll get back to you where I can. Hope everyone is well and happy, and I'll catch you next clip. Cheers folks. Ha, look at this. I've spotted a worm coming out of a cocoon. Well, there you go. I have seen it before, but I've never caught it on camera. Just to let you folks know, I've had a few people ask, those brown things behind me there, they're loofahs. They're the scrubbing loofah that you see in people's showers and that sort of thing. You can also use them as dishcloths. While I was making the compost cage behind me, the round one there, I kicked out the roots of the plant, so unfortunately I've killed the vine. So just had a few people ask, so I thought I'd let you know, those hanging brown things, they're loofahs.